thank you everybody who's hanging in here for our very densely packed program today. Our next speaker is Jonathan Billings. Jonathan worked with Sharad Joshi, so we have concluded the Jeff Bale advised portion of the program. We're moving on. And Jonathan's topic is Deobandism, Jihadism, and Nationalism, impacts on counter-extremism strategy in Pakistan.
Good afternoon. Hope everybody's well fed. Like I said, I'm Jonathan Miller. I'm in the MIIS program, and depending on how this goes, I'll be graduating tomorrow. My thesis was Deobandism, Jihadism, and Nationalism, in the subtitle that he provided. But really, it's about the intersection of those 3-4 ideas in Pakistan and what implications we can draw from an examination of that intersection to identify points of focus when engaging with militancy in Pakistan. The thesis itself consisted of a historical review of the development of Islamism in South Asia broadly, particularly India, Pakistan, and Afghanistan, extending all the way from 7th century Arabia through the foundations of Sufism and Transnational to its expansion into India, and then watching that develop forward into Deobandism today and seeing that impact the concept of statehood in Pakistan. 2 big implications of that right off the bat. First, the sort of narrative that's prevalent in the literature about the Afghan conflict in the 80s, sort of genesising this jihadist problem. That narrative is explicitly false. The problem goes much, much further back in history. If you want to look for a foundation in jihadism, you don't need to look at the 20th century, you need to look at the 19th century. A secondary and more narrow implication of this examination was identifying ways to hinder the attempted expansion of the Islamic State in Pakistan, particularly due to the unique relationship between militancy and the state. Because of the way that the ideology developed in the region, there's an almost impermeable bond between militancy and statehood in Pakistan. As a transnational organization, even though their ideologies are in sync to some degree between the Islamic State and domestic militancy, the transnational makeup puts them in conflict with the sort of nation-centric focus of domestic militancy, and consequently you can look at that divide and exploit that divide is effectively the argument. So that's where we're going. To get there, I'm going to take you through the historical narrative a little bit, the development of Islamism in the region, Deobandism, the introduction of Jihadism, the establishment of nationalism, and how they all came to collide. Before I get into that, though, a bit of a primer on Sufism. Deobandism itself is sort of a legacy of a very long ideological evolution within Sufi thought. Sufism is commonly understood as a kind of Islamic Hinduism in a sense, right? It's a kind of mystically focused Islam. That's nice, but doesn't have the benefit of being particularly accurate. Sufism is a unique form of Islam where information and sort of spiritual credibility is transmitted between a master and a student. It's a one-on-one relationship repeating over and over and over through the centuries. That's the idea anyway. That notion of bayat in Islam broadly, the concept of pledging loyalty, use the same terminology when you're talking about Sufism, but it carries this extra connotation of being initiated into that spiritual line. That line you can sort of trace through history and see how an ideology or a line of thought developed, but it's not perfect. Because when you can be initiated into a Sufi chain both by receiving bayat directly from a student, if you're a master, and thereby establishing that connection, or by a student pledging bayat or making that spiritual connection with somebody from the past, meaning the initiator need not be alive. So when you look at the links in the chain, you can see things that inspired certain initiates and track the ideology that way, but it's not so perfect as to be able to look at this person to this person to this person to this person because there's no literal connection. Furthermore, those Sufi chains, whether I should be more specific. So chains of individuals tend to be known as tariqas. The names of a given chain is usually attributed via the contribution of a specific person. So the case of Deobandism, that stems from Naqshbandiya Mujahideen Tariqa. Tariqa meaning the way or path. Naqshbandiya coming from the name Bahauddin Naqshband, who was a 14th century scholar. Mujahideen being added later because of the contributions of Hawkins or Hindi, which I'll touch on. That's one distinct line of thinking, but people can be influenced within Sufi thought by multiple Sufi chains. So it's probably better to think of it more as a kind of spiritual chainmail than a singular chain that leads through time. There's an interwoven thing there. The first link in most, if not all, Sufi chains, and sort of the primary point you should start when you're examining Islamist thought anywhere is 7th century Arabia. Our story specifically starts in the cave of Thawr, when Muhammad was fleeing Mecca, going to Medina. Him, according to the story, him and Abu Bakr Siddiq went to stop and rest in this cave. Siddiq enters first with the intent of making sure the cave is safe. He sees a hole in the floor of the cave. He places his foot over the hole and sits down. The Prophet comes and lays his head upon his Siddiq's thigh, but there's a snake in the hole. The snake starts biting at Siddiq. Siddiq starts crying, a tear falls from his eye, lands on the cheek of the Prophet. There's this nice exchange about religious devotion and loyalty and whatnot. And in response, Muhammad pours into the heart of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq the knowledge that Allah had poured into him. That, in theory, is this first transmission of divine knowledge. So again, with Bayat, when you're establishing that chain, you are receiving that knowledge as transmitted through time from Muhammad and ultimately from God himself. A few links later in the chain, you see Ja'far as-Siddiq appearing. It's the sixth Shia Imam. This is important because he is of bloodline descendant to the Prophet. He's a physical connection, whereas Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, because of that spiritual connection, at Ja'far as-Siddiq they coalesce. So from that point forward, it's called the golden chain, because you have that extra layer of legitimacy going through time. Now, due to time constraints, we're going to jump forward a few centuries into 14th century Uzbekistan, which in the literature you're going to read about as Transnational, which is basically Central Asia before we came up. Well, Central Asia about that period includes parts of Uzbekistan, Afghanistan, and all of the nations in the area. So you have Bahauddin Naqshband, and he is considered a saint. The chain is the Naqshbandiya chain, broadly speaking, is named for him specifically because of his spiritual contribution. So those contributions, the significance of them are sort of not all that clear. His life wasn't well documented. But it doesn't really matter because for us it's a transition point. Up to him and to his era, Naqshbandi Sufism was explicitly apolitical. There was explicit direction: do not make friends with kings. Run from people as you would run from lions. Do not engage. It's very, 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 very reclusive. Following the establishment of the chain, which is named for him, you have Ubaydullah Afrar. And this guy is a big deal. He decides to apply the reasoning that edict about not acting politically is very dependent upon the age of the person making that decision, so we should act politically now. When he grew up in Iran, he noticed that the religious leadership that was around him, that they didn't have any political power. When they would try and help the people, they couldn't do that effectively because they wouldn't be taken reasonably by the powers that be. So he established a political relationship, and a really large economic political network that allowed him to act as an intermediary between the needs of the people and the needs of governing parties. But this was the Timurid Empire, and it had been split into three parts. So he was surviving politically by moving between these three competing political entities and remaining in this sort of weird apolitical middle ground, helping to engage the people. Near the end of that century, going into the beginning of the first, you have Babur, who is known for establishing the Mughal Empire. He comes into play. Him and Akrar's descendants form a very close relationship. Naqshbandi Sufis in that period was deeply embedded in the Mughal Empire politics. At first, it was just that political relationship. But over time, that relationship became so close that they became a kind of Muslim nobility, or a big, big part of it. So their relationship with the state was solidified. When Babur came, he first took Kabul in the early 1500s, and then in the middle of the 1500s, he went and conquered Delhi, that established the Mughal Empire. Right? He dies, and he's succeeded by Humayun. But at the time that he dies, his other son, Mirza Kamran, is in control of Kabul. Now, by this time, Kabul had become a sort of religious and spiritual center for Naqshbandi Sufism, but Delhi was the center of gravity, of political gravity. So Naqshbandi Sufism is stretched between these two centers of gravities over what would become Pakistan. They basically battle it out. The Naqshbandis had sided with Kamran. Kamran loses. They managed to come back into Humayun's favor. Humayun controlled the whole empire again dissolved. Well, then he dies. He unfortunately falls down some steps. And his children take over. But it's the same thing again. His 2-year-old son is put in charge of Kabul. His 13-year-old son, Akbar, is put in charge of Delhi. This is the next succession on the line. But these children are too young to actually run the empire, right? They're influenced too much by the political winds of the powers that were in these different centers. So this became incredibly polarized. Eventually, Akbar wins, but not before the Naqshbandis side with Kabul again and lose again. So there's this a sort of establishment of an inverse relationship between, at this point, you establish this pattern of a decreasing political influence, and then very, very quickly following that, you see an inverse relationship between that and how puritanical this change becomes. By near the end of Akbar's reign, we're talking the 17th century now. You have, right near the end of it, around 1600, Baqi-ullah, can't find his name, his first name. Baqi-ullah was a Sufi scholar who had studied and basically resided in Kabul, travels to Delhi, interacts with Al-Mansur Hindi. Al-Mansur Hindi is the person who made these contributions that added this additional appendage to Sufi Tariqa, Naqshbandi and Mujahideen. In Sufi thought, there was this common understanding called wahdat al-wujud, or the unity of being. It was this idea that all of existence is just an extension of God. There is that the concept of God is not distinct from humanity, we're all part of it. And he theorized that this idea was problematic. He suggested that people were coming to that conclusion because they were not pursuing Sufi practice far enough. If you take another step forward, rather than being absorbed in this overwhelming light of God, you can once again see multiplicity, and consequently distinguish man from God. This is important because what it did was bring the concept of God in Sufism closer to just non-Sufi, sort of orthodox Sunni conceptions of what God is, right? Because this is obviously, to say that conflate God and man would be intensely heretical in most just general Sunni thought. He also expressed this idea of the coincidence of the law, basically articulating that Sufi mystical practice should never supersede Sharia. Whether or not it did vary, but the point is that he put a cap on mysticism. And as you see the puritanical thought sort of evolve over time, mysticism starts becoming more and more decreased. When he was doing this in response to successive rulers. Akbar himself had started to, Humayun himself had started to move away from the Naqshbandis, favoring the Chishti order in India. Not to mention that little kerfuffle with them siding with Kabul when they didn't have it. Akbar took less interest in sort of orthodox practice. Jahangir was engaged in sort of, Jahangir was Akbar's son who succeeded Akbar in the 17th century, engaged in this kind of explicit orthopraxic theater. He would attend festivals and promote members of the ulama and things of that nature, with the intent of maintaining enough influence with that community to use those connections for his own gain. This was smart and had a historical precedent, but it was also pretty transparent. Hindi was reacting to this. Ironically, once you had a leader that actually did come in and start trying to put in, to implement Sharia in a proper way, by that I mean in a complete way, he did so inconsistently. This was Aurangzeb. I'm skipping a few successions here. Aurangzeb, you're talking end of the 17th, beginning of the 18th century. He was more overtly orthodox. He did institute jizya or something comparable. He did engage in more explicit Sharia-like practice. The problem was that when he was conquering, this didn't really apply. When he was going around and trying to expand the empire and conquer different areas, he would offer nobles, whether they were Muslim or not, played positions of power because pragmatically speaking, it made it easier for him to conquer things. But the practical consequence of that is that he's not being uniform. So you combine this negative orthodoxy, or this sort of confusing set of policies, with really bad economic mismanagement of a growing empire, and you have the stage for the turmoil of the 18th century, where you had like 6 to 10 different rulers of the Mughal Empire in a period of 8 decades. It was really, really awful. During this turmoil was when Shah Waliullah lived. He was a major ideologue in the region, sort of a successor to Sir Hindi. He wrote a lot about, he was virulently sectarian, virulently sort of xenophobic. He was of Arab descent and proud of it. He also went and studied in Medina contemporaneously with Abdul Wahhab, who who Wahhabism is named for. He had this really specific articulation of what an Islamic state should be, or what Islamic political dominance should look like. When he described the development of civilization, he didn't take a purely Islamic view, or not like his sources weren't solely Islamic. He took it from observation of the world. So he viewed the development of society and basically as people coming closer together, slowly coalescing into cities. And in his mind, a caliph was a political arbiter between leadership of cities. So this giant political unit is comprised of cities, not states. This will be important later. He also did write extensively about jihad, that the people that followed him in the 19th century that embedded jihadism in the region. Following in the beginning, one more thing. That turmoil was so significant. 3 years after Shah Waliullah's death is when the first Diwani status was applied. I believe it was Bengal. So basically that was when the East India Company started taking political control of India. This was sort of a nascent colonialism. He was expressing these ideas in a truly pre-colonial India, meaning an India on descent toward colonialism. Early 19th century, you have Sayyid Ahmed of Raebareli, which in the literature you'll see spelled 50 different ways because of the unfortunate way that wow is written by English speakers. And Shah Muhammad Ismail. Right. So Sayyid Ahmed basically popularized a less academic version of Naqshbandiya Sufism. He rejected the idea of an academic elite, partly because of the way that he studied, or didn't. One of Shah Waliullah's sons, Shah Aziz, was the person who he had pledged bayat to. Very early along, in what is usually a very long academic process, Shah Aziz decided that he should only progress now by just direct divine inspiration. So he starts going around and propagating this idea, but he shifts the concept of bayat a little bit. Rather than making this a one-on-one thing, a one-on-one relationship that's very close and takes years, he could initiate 500 people in one sitting. And those people, because he believed he was going for more of a sense of the divine rather than an actual experience of it, these people could initiate other people the same night. He was doing this in the Northwest Tribal region, in the area that Deobandism later became popularized in. So this is what propagated this sort of popular mystical Salafism. In the literature of the period and the literature afterward, a lot of times it's called Wahhabism. That is explicitly inaccurate. Wahhabism is a very specific form of Salafist Islam related to the Al-Najid province in Saudi Arabia. Because people were going back and forth and studying there, certainly those principles influenced things. But Sayyid Ahmed was initiated into multi-Sufi orders. He claimed to have been initiated by Baha'u'ddin Naqshbandi himself, who died centuries prior. All of this is explicitly heretical in Wahhabism. So it's influenced by, but you can't equivocate between the two. Again, that being said, both contemporary British and regionally based scholars did use that terminology. It's inaccurate and not useful to us anymore, but that is how they understood it. Shortly after this engagement, this is the teens, the 18 teens, when he popularized this, he then decides to go on jihad. He decides to go to fight the Sikhs in basically part of what would become Kashmir. And both him and Shah Muhammad Ismail, who I keep mentioning but haven't qualified yet, he wrote a lot about more puritanical Sunni justifications for the behavior. His writings are a lot of reference after the fact. They go and engage jihad, they die in battle. They become martyrs, and this is embedded in sort of the regional narrative of jihad and jihadism. In the region, and sort of this pretext behind using jihad or saying you're doing jihad even in the absence of a caliphate, which is explicitly required to wage jihad. That's why this is the establishment of jihadism, because this is the establishment of non-state violence under the auspices of jihad in Pakistan, the embedding of it in the cultural narrative, which comes into play in about 30 years after this or so, in 1857, when they revolted against the British. It doesn't work out so great, but when they do it, a lot of people were debating whether or not this was a jihad, and that wasn't a conversation that would have been possible 100 years prior. 10 years after that revolt fails, the Darul Uloom at Deoband is established. This is the school for which Deobandism is named, because it's the line of thinking coming out of this school. It was established by people in the explicit ideological line leading from Sheikh al-Islam, but it was explicitly not a Sufi school. They stripped all mysticism away from it completely. They were just teaching the interpretation of hadith, really focusing on hadith, Quranic exegesis, which is Islamic law. But it's less than a manifestation of Sufism than it probably was. It was probably producing people that reflected an ideological mean of Sunni Puritanism at the end of the 19th century. So when we think about Deobandism generally, that's what we're describing as people coming from that milieu. Over the next 10, 20, 30 years after it was established, you had this network of madrasas proliferate, right? Deoband kept the tradition of bayat, so that notion of loyalty to an instructor in Naqshbandi Sufism applies in Deobandism. But that network may have had a precedent in Sufism itself, because the Khanaka network, Khanakas are Sufi lodges, right? Spiritual centers, which are established by people loyal to people from someone from another Khanaka. Those networks had already been established for centuries and extended all the way back into Uzbekistan. So there was a precedent for this big concept of a madrasa network already. I'm going to speed up a little bit because I know I'm way over time.
2 more minutes?
No problem. Thank you. Oh, God. 1880s, you have pan-Islamism becomes a sort of popular thing on the ground in the wake of British taking control. It was a reaction to whereas before there was Islamist arguments against an established political power in the region. The dominant political power in the region was now the global one, and so there was a sense of solidarity, enhanced sense of solidarity with the Ummah globally generally. The Muslim League was established in the early 1900s. This was the start of the political manifestation of Deobandi ideas. People felt underrepresented and excluded from the system. They felt marginalized, they felt minimalized, and so they formed this organization to deal with that and started engaging with the Indian Congress directly to establish themselves. By 1918, you had the Khilafat movement, which was led by Gandhi. The idea was to use the issue of the caliphate being disassembled at the fall of World War I as a way of building enough solidarity among all Indians to effectively remove British controls. Out of that movement, JUH, what is effectively the Deobandi, the political avatar, explicit political avatar of Deobandism, is established, and then eventually from then you have a more extreme version, JI and JUI, or JI explicitly coming from Maududi. Starting with the historical narrative there, Maududi is the key figure here because at the time of this period between the Khilafat movement and the independence in 1947, Maududi's thoughts shifted. At first, he was very communally focused. His fixation was on, basically within the Muslim League there were 3 camps. There's people who wanted were communalists, who thought prioritizing the Ummah was important. There was people who thought that an independent Indian state from the British were important. And, oh my gosh. And then there was people that didn't want the status quo to change, basically. But the concept of the state itself didn't exist yet. So Maududi was against all of this anyway, because he thought that the idea of conflating the Ummah with a nation was farcical. You can't have an Islamic state because it's not a national body, it's a unified community, was his articulation. As the argument for Pakistan was eventually made, basically because some political acts in around about 1935 made it very apparent that the Muslim minority was not going to be able to get effective political representation. The argument for an explicit Pakistan exists, but Maududi's still in opposition because this is still an Islamic nation state, effectively. But that's the sort of pseudo-argument, and he thought that was silly. But by 1959, that changed. He actually said the Islamic state is a national state. I cannot overemphasize how significant that is. There is no precedent for a Westphalian Islamic state in classical Islamic literature. There's an expression of political dominance, but this idea of applying a Westphalian lens to Islamic political dominance could not have happened until this political shift changed, right? Once you have Pakistan established, they start using the militancy as early as 1947. They deployed Lashkars, I believe, to Kashmir. And over the last half of the 20th century, this just grows and grows and grows. So when you see the militancy in Afghanistan, the reason I say that that is not the start of the story, because that existed as a consequence of the state militancy relationship extending into the region in the 80s that had already been present for 30 years between the militancy and the state. It had already been ideologically established for centuries, and Jihadism itself had already been around for more than 100 years. When you look at the global Jihadism specifically, you have Al-Qaeda which operated in Pakistan, and you have ISIS, which is encroaching now. These two are very, very, very distinct organizations. Oftentimes when you read about Al-Qaeda, you'll hear about it defined as a transnational organization. I contend this is incorrect. They are a transnational organization when you look at their communication structures. Sure, they just by virtue of using the internet and being a coherent organization in any respect, of course they're a transnational organization. But they operate multinationally. They maintain relationships with different militancies in different countries, right? But those militancies pursue domestic objectives under the flag of Al-Qaeda. That's not transnational, that's multinational. The Islamic State has explicitly challenged Westphalian boundaries by their expanding over the Iraq and Syria border, right? So there's something quantifiably different about how that organization operates and how Al-Qaeda operates. When you look at Al-Qaeda in Pakistan now, it's become more focused on domestic issues rather than like Al-Qaeda in South Asia. The reason for that is they would get really unpopular by the end of by around 2009, their popularity dropped from 25% to 9% in Pakistan. They were perceived as a threat to the state because they were sort of explicitly hurting the populace. And so out of sort of this pragmatic reasoning, even though they have a totalitarian transnational ideology, they receded toward domestic issues for the purpose of survival. ISIS won't do that, and it's never done that. In fact, when ISIS split from Al-Qaeda, at the time it was ISIS, or AQI, when they allied with the al-Nusra Front in Syria, they said, okay, we're going to be one thing now. The leadership in Al-Qaeda Central said, hey, don't do that. AQI should focus on Iraq, and al-Nusra should focus in Syria. They maintain their multinationalist unity position this way, and I said no. The Sykes-Picot Agreement does not define our actions. We will formulate and operate this way. When you look at the nature of militancy in Pakistan, because of that historic relationship between the militancy and the state, there is an investment of the militancy in the state. They view themselves as participants in it. Yes, sometimes that's vitriol, and yes, sometimes that's violence. But when they act domestically, the intent is to alter or adjust domestic Pakistani politics. But Pakistani militant groups don't tend to attack outside of Pakistan that much because they're state-focused. When you look at ISIS, Islamic State's goals in the region, their goal is to make Pakistan not be a thing. If you were to go to a Pakistani militant group, you're going to make an argument. Hey, we don't want you to join the Islamic State. That's a bad idea, right? If you make the ideological argument, you will lose. There's too many similarities between what groups in Pakistan ideologically say they want to accomplish, particularly with the gradual Islamization pattern of JI, and what the Islamic State was to argue. However, if you can display that militancy in Pakistan is politically threatened, if they will lose political influence because of the encroachment of ISIS, because they are limiting Pakistan as a state, there can be no Pakistani militancy without Pakistan. If you make that articulation, you don't have to support the militancy's ideology, but you can make them less receptive to an imposing and possibly threatening external militancy. And I'm aware of it, so that's probably the place to stop.
A couple of questions, but I think we're going to have time for more than that.
Yeah,
that was a very rich talk.
I'll do one. Others don't have one. Or was there someone else? Cool. So that was incredibly rich, and you have this extraordinary fluency with the history. What I would have liked to have seen a little more of is a little more sort of elevator pitching. Like, here are my bottom lines, and like, here's the structure. And if you are not as deeply versed in or quite as enthusiastic about the sort of details of this, I'm going to provide you with that. So I wonder if you want to take a crack at that. Like, in a couple sentences, like, what would you, like, sort of the gist of it? Because I think I kind of have a sense of it, but I'd love to hear it from you.
No problem. So, Generally understanding Pakistani militancy requires a view beyond the 1980s. When you're using that view, you can structure it pretty easily. The 14th century established the conservative values of the ideology in the region. The 15th to 16th established the political relationship. The 17th to 18th centuries it became puritanical. And in the 19th century, this was popularized and jihadism was validated. The 20th century, all of these things meant nationalism, and that's what you're dealing with today. If you don't consider all of those factors, you will come to the wrong conclusions about how militancy in Pakistan operates.
So that was awesome. I mean, I think and everyone, seriously though, right? The kind of cliche about presentations is tell them what you're going to tell them, then tell them with more nuance, and then sum it up at the end and tell them what you told them. And that was a masterful little summary. Right up front, and again at the end, right? And now a lot of things make a little more sense to me that I sort of got as you were talking. But at times I tuned out and struggled with that.
I rehearsed that, and it honestly kind of got nervous.
It's all right. It's all right. What did you say you teach again?
Sharad, do you want to, since you were the advisor, give any suggestions for feedback?
Right. So, I mean, what I find particularly interesting amongst the many things in your thesis is especially the rich historical discussions, including from the 17th and 18th century on. I think that's the key here. Because that's when you see all of the really fascinating upheavals taking place, which reflects, Islamism in South Asia today also. Now, I know this is sort of outside the focus of your thesis, primarily because I asked you not to focus. How would you relate Deobandism in Pakistan with the original Deobandi ideology which had emerged in India, which continues to be around? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So sort of just to orient you geographically, Deoband is located in northern India, so up north near the border, and sort of, if you're looking at a map, inch left toward Pakistan, that's about where you'll find.
It's outside of Delhi.
Yeah, that's about where you'll find Deoband. So Deobandism was effectively just Sunni puritanicalism, but regionally specific. Deobandism in Pakistan is a result of both the proliferation of the ideology westward and the political tumult of the 20th century. So there's the relationship between Deobandism and the state of Pakistan is unique, specifically because Pakistan was trying to become a state while it felt like it was threatened. It was a minority community who felt disenfranchised. Deobandism in India, you still had a minority status, but the relationship with the state isn't as embedded because Deobandism did not contribute to the creation of India as a state in the same way that that Deobandism did in Pakistan. So the Muslim League had a direct hand in building Pakistan as a thing. And the Muslim League was populated in part by ulama who were of the Deobandi line of thought, who felt disenfranchised. So that milieu was involved in the establishment of Pakistan as a thing. In India, that wasn't the case, so you still have this Sunni puritanical sort of basis, but the relationship with the state, if it exists, is weaker.
Yeah, and that I think is a great variation, which shows that you have multiple forms of Islamism within the same sort of regional milieu. And I think that's a really important insight. So there's no one Islamism also in South Asia. And that I think has all sorts of policy implications. In India, if anything, the Deobandis are fairly nationalist. Which is not something that really emerges in a lot of the contemporary literature on Islam.
Thank you, Josh.